Good afternoon. Welcome back to the B&H event space. Today we are talking black and white photography, capturing it and editing it. And with zero latency, I would like to welcome Mahesh Thapa back to the program. Mahesh, what's going on, man?
Oh, Derek, I wish I could share that story you shared with me before we Little private joke there, people, the latency comment. It's great to be back, Derek.
Always good to have you.
Great to have you hosting again. I loved everybody else, but you're my favorite, you know
Thank you,
that.
man. Look, it's reciprocated. I feel like there's always good energy when you're on top of the great information. Huge thank you to Sony for
Yeah,
hosting, but it's always, a wealth of knowledge, experience, and just overall good vibes, man. So I'm gonna turn it over to you, let you do what you do best. I'm gonna do what I do best. Get out of the way, but remind you guys to check out this and all of our other live recorded content on YouTube at B&H Event Space. And if you're on there now watching live, get your questions answered. Throw them into the comment section, and I'll see all of you for some Q&A in a bit.
awesome. Thank you, Derek. Always great to be back. Always so grateful for B&H, for Sony to continue asking me back and allowing me to use this platform to share some knowledge with you all. Today, we're going to be talking about black and white photography, sort of how I approach it, my philosophy for black and white photography, some tips, particularly 5 tips. The talk is going to be divided into a little bit like this, right, where I talk to the camera. I'm going to show you some slides, share some tips, show you the difference between various filter effects, and then we're going to do a live demonstration with a couple of images as I work with them in Lightroom and sort of put into practice some of the concepts I talk about during this talk. So if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask them. And I think Derek is keeping track of it, or somebody in BH is keeping track of it. We'll get this answered as soon as the talk is over. I've left some room at the end, so if there's an abundance of questions, we will have time to go through those also. Okay, so let me just share my screen real quick, and we'll get started. Okay, so today's topic, black and white landscape photography, health tips and suggestions, how you take it, how you edit it, and things like that. If you want to follow me on Instagram, it's Starving Photographer. My website is starvingphotographer.com. A lot of the images you see here will be shared there as well. Couple of quick disclosures. I am a Sony Alpha Collective member, meaning I'm an ambassador for Sony. I use basically Sony equipment to do all my capturing from the cameras, the lenses, other accessories. Obviously, it's not Sony because they don't make a lot of filters and things like that. All images I share with you today is from a Sony camera, whether it's APS-C, point and shoot, full frame, or even like the Xperia line, the phone cameras. They're all taken by the Sony system. I love this quote. It's a very famous quote. I think most people in photography know about this. And this is by Ansel Adams. He says, "You don't take a photograph, you make it." And nowhere is it really truer, I think, just like for Ansel Adams, as in black photography. Because in black photography, you don't have the luxury, I guess, of color. You have to rely on composition, textures, sometimes harsh light, filters if you need it. So all of it's in many ways, I think it's a much harder genre to master, to do well than color photography. And hopefully I can share with you a few tips that'll get you a little bit closer to becoming a better black and white photographer, particularly for landscapes. Uh, Tip number 1, embrace the harsh light. We're always told in photography, oh, you want the golden hour light. You wait until the sun has set or the colors in the sky are popping. Well, you can throw that out the window because in black and white photography, we deal in light and shadows, contrast. When is the contrast the most conspicuous, the most prevalent? It's during harsh light, midday light, 2 o'clock light, 3 o'clock light. You can also have great light, great compositions and such in the golden hours, but nowhere in photography, I think, is harsh light actually helpful to you more than in black and white landscape photography. For example, here's an image I took of Mount Hood. This was taken in midday. but it looks like great, beautiful lighting because the contrast works here, right? The composition works here, textures work here, and I don't really worry about the light as much as I would in color photography. Here's one more example. The sun is basically directly overhead, but it creates this wonderful effect, I think, on the clouds, these sort of what I called diamond-like reflections on the water. It's just like millions of diamonds on the water that's just sparkly and glistening. And if you were to see this in color, it would look terrible, I think. In fact, I think people sometimes make the mistake of sharing both the color version and a black and white version and asking, "Hey, which one do you like better?" There's always going to be a division. Most people are going to choose the color version. So if you know the color version is kind of crappy, don't share it. Just show them the beautiful black and white version that you've created. So here, I'm not even going to share what this looks like in color, but I really love how it came out in black and white, and it's all due to certain filters I've used, certain dodging and burning techniques that can be easily done, and editing is actually a little easier on black and white images than it is in color images. So here's a midday image that I was proud of. Uh, Here, another beautiful place, Monument Valley, a road shot taken in midday. Again, I used a red filter. I'll show you what that looks like. And if it was a film camera, this is sort of what you'd use, and we'll cover that in a little bit more detail. Hopefully you saw that. That really changed the blueness in the sky, if you will, into a dark tones and made the clouds pop out against that dark background. The redness of the rock actually got a little brighter, so it added further contrast. So again, harsh light, midday, still does really well. It works well because you still are using other elements in your photograph genre. You're using composition, you're using textures, right? So all those come together. Here's an image of a broken down old house or barn in the Palouse with these beautiful green wheat fields, puffy white clouds, and this blue sky. Again, a little bit of an orange filter. So an orange filter, again, we'll talk a little bit more about filters in later, but I'll just tell you how I took this image. You can use yellow filters, red filters, orange filters, and the closer towards the red you go, and particularly for landscape photography, the darker the sky is going to become, right? So a yellow filter will just darken it a little bit, orange a little bit more, and red really. And there are different shades of red. There's a really dark red and there's a not so dark red. It's a spectrum. If you use those filters on a black and white film camera or a black and white sensor, then you have that effect. But you can recreate these effects later on a color image using Lightroom or Photoshop, and we'll go through that too. But in essence, that's what I've done in this picture. It's not just a simple color image that I have converted into black and white. I've tweaked it a little, particularly with this pseudo filters in Lightroom and Photoshop. Another image from the Palouse. This is more subtle effect, where I have not darkened the sky as much because I like that more subdued effect here. Uh, Compositionally, I've actually gone very, very low to the ground. Had I been at eye level with the tripod, for example, some of these branches over here, it would have overlapped with the wheat fields in the distance, and it would not, in my opinion, have looked as pleasing or as clean as getting low and making sure none of these branches that are hanging from the bottom of the trees are actually overlapping with your wheat fields. And these puffs of clouds being concentrated just around the tree, I had to sort of position myself to have that effect as opposed to the clouds being over here or over here. Again, a compositional decision, but these are things that you end up, I think, paying more attention to, knowing that you're going to be doing black and white photography, or if you're converting images to black and white photography. So again, midday light, harsh light. So this is probably the most unique aspect of black and white landscape photography, and it's pre-visualizing filter colors. And what do I mean by that? Back in the day when we had black and white film, and even now, there are certain cameras that only shoot in black and white, on black and white sensor only. What we have to rely on physical color filters in front of your lens to get the effect that you want. Uh, Here's what I'm talking about. So there are filters like this. Let's see if I can see myself here. Here's a green, dark green filter. I literally would screw this in front of a lens if I was using black and white film or if I had a black and white sensor. Green filter. Here's an orange filter, for example. I think you can see that pretty well. Here's sort of a dark red filter, but they also have other colors, yellow filter, green filter. But what do I mean by pre-visualizing these filters? Well, here's an image on your left. It was taken at a Japanese garden, and a monk happened to be walking by. So let's show you what this looks like in color. Okay. So the image on your left is in color. Actually, I like it. I like how the orange pops, all is surrounded by green. The image on the right is a straight monochrome conversion. I took the image on the left and just desaturated it, right? With no emphasis on any of the other hues or tones. So kind of boring. The monk kind of gets lost. But here's an image. Now I've moved the non-filter black and white image on the left, and this is a filter, the green filter. So look what happened to the foliage, right? The foliage became much brighter. And here's sort of a rule of thumb. The more emphasis you put on that one particular color, the lighter that color is going to look in your images. What I mean by that is if you use a green color filter or you apply a green effect on a color image when you convert to black and white, green tones in that image are going to appear lighter, brighter. It also has a complementary color. The green's complementary color for black and white photography, in essence, is things with warm tones, oranges, reds, yellows. So if you look at the dress, I guess the monk's outfit, it was sort of orange, reddish, right? And look what happened to that tone when this green filter was applied. It made it really dark compared to a conventional non-filtered approach. It made it really dark. So it made the greens even brighter, as you can see over here, and it made the oranges or the yellows even darker than it is. So let's apply another filter to the same image. Here is a blue filter. I don't have a blue filter to show you, but if you had a blue filter and you're shooting black and white photography or had a monochrome sensor, this is the effect you'd get by putting it on. But we can simulate that in Lightroom and Photoshop. Again, we'll cover that as we go a little further. But I want you to get an idea of pre-visualizing these types of images. Here, what it does, it makes the bluer tones a little lighter. So there's some degree of blue, if you will, in your wood bridge. So that's why that appears a little bit brighter. There's a little bit of blueness, if you will, in the rocks. So you can't even tell these are rocks, but these are rocks over here, rocks over here. They appear a little bit brighter. So, and what is the sort of non-complementary or the complementary color of the blues? It's going to be the greens, right? Greens, and here the greens and the reds are actually turning darker than they normally would in a regular conversion. So the blues become a little brighter and the greens become a little darker. The reds and orange we'll cover next. So here's a red filter, right? Red filter, remember I said the red is going to make whatever is red in the image or very dark orange or yellow a little brighter. And that's what's happened here to the monk's outfit. It's become brighter because that had a lot of orange, a lot of red tones in it. Its complementary colors for the red are going to be the bluer tones. And so some of the bluer stuff is a little darker over here. The greens are relatively the same. It doesn't have as much effect on the green tones, but the red filter is going to make the red lighter and blue tones darker. Sometimes people like to use yellow or orange filters to take portraits of people because oftentimes fleshy tones, like for example, if you look at this monk, his tones, he had some red in his skin tones, some oranges, so that really made it stand out. It'll brighten somebody's skin tone, particularly if it's a dark environment, especially or if it's somebody with darker tones, you want to really be able to see their face a little brighter, more contrasty against a darker scene. an orange filter or a red filter will really accentuate that. I like not to use red filter so much because it really makes it super bright. I sort of tend to go with the yellow or the orange filters if I'm taking pictures of people, and I know I'm gonna convert that to black and white later on. That's a great sort of tip, not just for landscapes, but for portrait photography. So that's the red filter. So here is sort of an overall view of the color image. So the regular, boring, converted image with no filter applied is the image on your left, right? The image on the right, what is this one? That's the green filter. We know it's the green filter because the foliage, if you look at the foliage, the green foliage, it's become bright. It's almost like an infrared effect. So that's a sort of a tip that if you want to do infrared type of photography, and you don't want to sort of convert your camera or get these expensive infrared filters, you can just put a green filter in front of your camera, shoot during bright light, have a lot of foliage that's green, and you can get that sort of infrared look to it if you want. So that's the green filter. This here is the red filter. We know that because the red tones here have become much brighter. And here is the blue filter. The blue filter typically isn't used so much in landscape photography, but you can use it for some dramatic effects. Like if you really wanted the dark foliage to be dark like this, and if let's say this was a blue bridge for that to really pop out, that may be a way to bring that type of effect into play. So hope that makes a little bit of sense as we move forward. I'm going to give you one more example. So here is a scene from the Palouse. Again, not quite harsh light, but not quite the golden light either. A little yellow, that's fine. But it's an old abandoned barn with these golden wheat fields. I like this image because I've got these sort of golden tones, yellow tones here, green tones here, and blue tones up here. And there's actually a little bit of blue on the barn itself because the tin roof is like reflecting the blue of the sky. So image on your right is a boring, run-of-the-mill, straight conversion, if you will, just sliding from color to monochrome, and this is what you get. I mean, it's okay, but nothing to write home about. Now, no filter on your left, green filter on your right. So the effect isn't as dramatic, right? Yes, some of the green fields are a little brighter if you look over here, see, but because the greens here are sort of a fall green or a summer green in the sense that it's sort of turning towards the yellow, turning towards the oranges. So there's not as much chlorophyll, if you will, in these green wheat fields, supposed to be clean wheat fields. So it doesn't get as bright or as light had it been a purely green wheat field, right? But you see, there is some lightning effect on your green fields. Not so much on the golden, maybe a little bit because the golden field still does have a little bit of green to it, so it does look a little brighter. The blue sky, it's relatively untouched. It doesn't have very much effect on the blue part of it. Maybe a little darker, but predominantly it's having an effect on the green tones. Look at how dramatic the blue filter becomes, right? Because there's so much green, so much of the yellowish tones. Anything that has any hint of that becomes dark. Remember, I said the color makes its same color lighter, so the blue in the sky became very, very bright. So bright such that now the clouds don't stand out as much. This is why I say the blue filter is not as popular in landscape photography because it literally has the opposite effect of what you want. You want a dramatic sky where the sky is dark, sort of maybe, and the foreground is bright. But in landscape photography, we have a lot of foliage, a lot of green, a lot of landscape, a lot of earth, which we want that to be kind of bright because you want the foreground to be bright and you want the sky to be dramatic. You want that to be sort of dark. So that's why the blue filter typically is not a very popular filter. But with that being said, look how nicely the barn stands out because the barn itself doesn't really have very many. Well, it has blue tones. It doesn't have the green tones. So the roof of the barn, for example, because it's reflecting the light from the sky, has become much brighter than a conventional conversion. Even the wood looks a little bit brighter, partly because it's surrounded by so much darkness, and your eye gets fooled a little bit, right? This probably isn't as bright as it appears, but it just looks that way because it's surrounded by so much dark elements. So it's a great way of bringing out certain parts of an image if you want to, but usually the blue filter is not used very heavily in landscape photography for this reason in particular. Now here, the red filter is used a lot in landscape photography, and this is a great example of why that's so. Look at what the red filter has done to the sky. The complementary color for the red filter is blue, so it's taken the blue in the sky and really darkened it, right? Such that the the white clouds really stand out. Uh, it's taken, now the wheat field themselves look a little brighter because it's yellow, and yellow has some degree of red in it, so it's gonna brighten that part of the tones to make the wheat fields much brighter. It has an effect to these fields here because it doesn't have as much of the yellow or the red. It's still more green than it is golden. The golden colors end up being a little lighter, and the blue tones, like I said, end up being quite dark. If you didn't want quite the dramatic effect, you could have used an orange filter, an even less effect, a yellow filter. So it's all sort of tones towards the red, and these are the filters along with the green filter that get used a lot in landscape photography for black and white conversions. So again, let's take a look at the original image in the middle. Your sort of boring, run-of-the-mill conversion is now in the upper left-hand corner. As we just saw, this is the dramatic red filter conversion with the very dark sky and the bright foreground. This is your blue conversion with, it kind of looks off to us because we hardly ever see an image like this in black and white where the sky is so bright and the foreground is so dark. So that's the blue, and here's the green, which doesn't really have much of an effect. You really can't tell much of an effect from this from your regular conversion. So as you can tell, that the red here really is the way to go. Okay, we're going to get back to that a little bit later about how you can do that in Lightroom, how you can simulate some of these effects. So I want to go to tip number 4 real quick. And I sort of brought this up before, but concentrate on composition, right? You've got the harsh light, the light's not doing you any favors, but it creates drama, it creates contrast. You've got textures to help you, but composition is key, right? Like most landscape photography, if you have the right composition, it can make up for a lot of other problems that may be present in your photography. So look for the rule of thirds, look for the S curves, look for the golden ratio, look for that natural framing, if you will, that frames your subject. All these things, that's true for color photography, is also true for black and white photography. Here's the picture of Mount Rainier. Again, this in color is very boring. It's a blue sky, harsh lighting, lots of shadows, but you turn it into black and white, something magic happens. It pops. And you really notice that S curve of the flowing water, particularly as it stands out against the darker rocks and the darker trees here. And the mountain really stands out against a dark-ish blue sky. Here I've used a sort of orange filter type of conversion. I didn't want to make it so dark that it became black like a red filter would do it, but sort of an orangish type of filter on the sky, and really makes everything pop, I think. But the major draw of this picture, in my opinion, is the composition, nothing else. Here's another example. This was taken in Death Valley, taken with a 400mm lens. I was way back. I sort of saw this moon rising or moon setting during sunrise, and sort of these shadows. One dune was in complete shadow, another one had some light on it, and this was actually a straight conversion. I didn't use any particular type of filter because the moon was bright enough that it was able to stand out against the sky. And I didn't want to make the sky so dark because then it would start blending in with the dark shadows of this dune. So, you have to know when to use filters, when not to use filters, filter effect. So that's the beauty of capturing color images. And you can decide later on how to manipulate these filters, how to combine these filter effects. Here's another shot. This was taken in an area called Skagit Valley in northern Washington, just north of Seattle. Again, here I've used the S shape of the composition of this irrigation system. You see how it's sort of this barn system, this barn and these trees are collected in the center. You can see the Olympic mountains in the distance, and all of that seems to be sort of framed by these low-lying clouds and the clouds overhead. Again, this was not during a golden hour. It was during harsh light where the sun had hidden behind one of the clouds a little bit. Still had some nice lighting in the distance and the top of the clouds. Virtually no light in the foreground, but because we have these textures, these compositions, the black and white image, I think really works in a situation like this. Here's another example. This was taken in midday. Hard to tell, but what really makes this image stand out, that's Mount Rainier. This is the Tatoosh Range in Mount Rainier National Park, is sort of the light on the clouds and how the top clouds will be over here and the bottom clouds over here, low-lying clouds. It's really framing Mount Rainier. How the tones of the rocks in this Tatoosh Range is completely different than the tones in Mount Rainier, which is heavily covered in snow. So again, composition, but contrast and textures and light really help to bring black and white photography into fruition, I think, particularly for images like this. Here, just this is Redwoods National Park. In the morning, I was on a hike. These beautiful dramatic lights came on. This was actually a low contrast image because all the haze and the moisture and the droplets in the atmosphere diffused the light. But if you convert it to black and white, apply a little bit of contrast, you can bring all these rays out, and it just has a magical quality when it's black and white versus, a muddy blue tone or a yellow tone that would be present in color. Tip number 4, we talked about sort of color filters and pre-visualizing what color filters may look like on your photograph, but also there are other filters that you should try, particularly ND filters. Now, I see people sometimes they discover ND filters and they fall in love with it, meaning that every single image they take is with an ND filter on, and everything is a blurred sky. Everything is a smoothed out water. The waterfalls look like shaving cream, and that's fine. I think, but as you use it, as you grow with it, you'll know when to use it, what strength to use it at, the effect you want to get. Sometimes maybe you want a little bit of texture still remaining in your image. You don't want to make it look like shaving cream. Personal taste, but I say learn how to use it judiciously, use it to help your image. Here's a picture, a very simple picture. It's just a rock in Australia in the middle of the water where I used a graduated neutral density filter and a coupled with a ND filter, ND3. So on a day that there's basically was no light towards the end of the day, so this is probably like a 30-second exposure, enough to blur out the fast-moving clouds overhead, while still, yes, blurring out the water, but there's still some texture. It doesn't look completely like shaving cream, and I love how the darkish tones of the rock really stand out in this type of environment. This is also an image where I had this is the famous Wanaka tree before the branch fell fell down or was taken down or what have you in New Zealand. Here I've used a graduated ND filter on the top and ND filter to smooth out the water and create these streaks in the sky overhead. Again, rely on your composition, rely on your textures. If you notice, this is not a dramatically lit scene. The clouds. There's no bright light. There's no light from a golden light. It's just the use of filters to create this effect where all the clouds look like they're pointing towards the tree. So again, use of composition, knowing the effect that these filters are going to have to create the mood that you want. Very simple picture, just a cool looking rock, I thought, in the beach. Again, if I had just taken a regular picture of it, I think it would not have been as dramatic as putting a big ND. This is actually during midday, so I needed like a 10 stop ND filter to create some of these emotions and blurring out the skies a little bit. So the point of this image is not to show, oh, it's not a particularly great image, but you could take a boring image and make it look pretty okay, pretty good. It's not may not be the, best in the world, but judicious, thoughtful use of filters can really enhance the image. Uh, this is Glacier National Park. This is actually a sunset. This actually looks pretty good as a color image too, but I just wanted to sort of point it out there that, sometimes color image can be converted black and white. It may look good in both situations. In most cases, it's one or the other, but here's one where I've used a ND filter to create some motion in the clouds. I loved how that reflection looked, but again, not so heavy an ND filter that I've completely streaked it out. I still have some textures. I still have some movement of the water that I've captured. Okay, finally, tip number 5, and this is where we're going to switch over a little bit to Lightroom, is learning to edit properly in black and white photography. I always get asked the question, do I go out one day thinking, oh, you know what, today I'm just going to capture black and white. Am I going to think in black and white for that particular day because that's what I'm doing is I'm going out. My answer is usually no, I'm not that smart, really. I go out and I take pictures and then I come home and I think, oh, you know what? This would be great in black and white. Or I'll see a scene and I say, well, this could look great in black and white. So let me take the picture. Let me pay attention to composition, textures, everything that I would normally pay attention to. I'm not worried about the light as much, and maybe this will look in black and white. So I experiment that way. There are people who go out with the attitude of just capturing black and white images, and that's great too, but my brain just doesn't think that way. So let me get to that point. I'm going to switch over to Lightroom here real quick. And I've already sort of chosen 2 images that I think are relatively decent to do a conversion on here. You'll get the magic of the color image, if you will, before the conversion. And then you see what I would particularly do. So here's an image I took during one of my hikes to an area called it's in Snoqualmie area, just east of Seattle. It's a trail towards one of the waterfalls there, but I thought the flowing water and this sort of cool looking red barn served as a nice backdrop, particularly with these green evergreens with some golden tones there. So if you look, I took this with an APS-C camera, I think, A6600 Sony. I used one of their 50 millimeter lens. Well, no, true. I used the 10 to 20 millimeter f4 lens at 15 millimeters. So that's a fairly wide, 50 millimeters APS-C is about 22 or so millimeters in full frame equivalent. So relatively a wide field of view. So when I look at this, I go, hey, it looks great in color, but there's a lot of greens here. There's a lot of reds here. Can I convert this such that I can make some of the elements pop? And I go, well, let's try it. So let's go to develop. And then if you were to just make into a black and white, at the very top, there's a little icon here. This is black and white. Eh, okay. Yeah, not so great. You know, the 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 tones here are a little brighter, but they sort of blend into the foliage, and the foliage doesn't really stand out as much against this flowing water. Now, what if we apply some of these quote unquote filter techniques that if that had it been a black and white camera, right? Or black and white sensor? Well, we can do that because just because you press the black and white image, Lightroom still knows what tones are what. They still know that this is a red bar. They still know this is a green foliage. So then I come down here into this black and white. So let me take you back. Let's say it wasn't converted. If you look, it says color mixer at this point. As soon as you make it into black and white, the color mixer becomes black and white over here, right? And here's where you can mess with the channels. So you could sort of take a global approach, if you will, and say, okay, I know the building here is kind of red, so I'm going to accentuate that red a little bit by making it darker. Now, that doesn't make sense because it sort of blends in with the foliage. What if I make it brighter? See, now just that red bar gets brighter and stands out a little bit more. I can say, oh, I know this is sort of greenish, bluish water, so let's work with the blue and make it a little darker. You see how the blue of the water got darker? It makes it really stand out against the white water. If the blue means that it'll probably have some aqua. You can do the same thing over there, make it a little darker. The greens, you can make the greens a little darker or brighter, so you can play around with that. See how going to the right makes the green brighter, going to the left makes it darker. So maybe making the green darker, making the reds brighter, it really brings out or makes that barn stand out, doesn't it? And that's just with a few sliders. Another trick is to use this icon over here. You can actually pick the particular color without actually knowing what's there. Meaning that, okay, if I click on this, I go, okay, I want this element here or these colors to be darker. So you click that, and then you click and drag up and down. You can make it darker, brighter. You see that without, and then if you look at what's happening on the sliders over here as I move this up and down. It knows exactly what tones are being affected. Same thing with the red. You can go up and down, up, and you can see the red. So these have reds and orange. That's what's being affected. So you could either use these global sliders, or you can just click on this and go to the particular area that you're interested and work at it that way. So this is a more sophisticated way, I think, of making your color image into a black and white and then editing it relatively quickly and in a real time showing what's happening. You could take this a little further if I'm not going to show this now because it's a little complicated. You can duplicate the image and make two separate conversions in black and white, such that in one image, the lower part of the image is emphasized, and the second image, the upper part of the image, and then combine them in Photoshop because you know maybe you didn't like the global effect of one image versus the other image on all parts of the image. So there's nothing stopping you from doing something like that. So that's example number one. Let's go back here. So here's another one. This is an image I took on one of my hikes. Forgot what the name of this hike was, but this was somewhere around Belfair, Washington, sort of across Puget Sound, the Hood Canal area, if you're ever out there. And here I have a predominance of sort of green colors. I have a different shade of green shirt I have on, white water. I've used a filter. I've used a tripod, with a remote release, and I've sort of gotten this. So let's go ahead and do our run-of-the-mill conversion to black and white by just pressing this. Again, it's okay. Nothing spectacular. But now if we go back to the slider, and at this point, I'm just going to make life easier on myself and just use this and say, okay, I know I want the light hitting the green leaves to be brighter. So I'm going to click on this and drag it. See how it's become brighter right there. And I want this log to be a little brighter. So I click on it. And so you notice because it has a little bit of green, it's become a little brighter. I want my shirt to be a little brighter. There I am. And maybe this darkness of the water here to be a little darker so it stands out. But it has a little green, so when this is being affected, some of that is being affected. I can go like this, right? So we take a sort of a boring black and white image, convert it, and make it into something like that. However you want to use this, let's make this, however you want to do it, you're in complete control of how this is going to look. So yeah, experiment a little bit, play around with this, go out, take some of your harsh images, if you will, the lighting with the harsh, and that's harsh, and convert it to black and white, and see how that looks. Uh, it's about 12:40 now. That's basically all I had for you guys. I'd love to answer any questions you guys have. And if I was unclear about anything, well, please don't hesitate. I'm happy to discuss this further.
Awesome. Thank you as always, Mahesh. We'll start it off with an Xperia question. Any
Ah,
experience with the Xperia? Have you used it at all? Own one? Any of
oh
them?
yeah, yeah. I own like four versions of the Xperia.
Or I think that what is there like seven now? A whole
I
lot.
don't know. I
There's a
last
whole
I
lot.
checked, it was five or six. I don't know. I stopped at five or six.
All
They
right.
stopped
So,
sending me Xperias after that.
well, good. I'm glad you got some experience with it because I don't. But Jesse's asking any tips for people like myself to use the Xperia smartphone?
You know, this is what's great about the Xperia smartphone. And probably my favorite thing about the Xperia smartphone is that it behaves just like a SLR or DSLR. It has all the same controls. You've got aperture priority, you've got manual. Actually, you got shutter priority and you got manual. You don't have aperture. There's only one aperture basically for the lens, but you got shutter priority. You can set your ISO. You can even buy filter systems for the Xperia. There are cases that a whole filter system, like for example, Nisi, some other companies, they make little system where you can put filters on there. So anything really that you think you can do with an Alpha camera, you can do with the Xperia. And the Pro version of the Xperia, at least I know, has a 1-inch sensor. So the quality of image also is also great coming out of the Xperia. So uh, no, nothing different, just it's the same concepts. If you know you're going to be doing very long exposures, use a tripod. There's no matter how good the image stabilization system is at any camera, it's not going to make up for the fact that that you're going to have to hold it still for so long. And because it's sort of based on the alpha system, it's actually a little harder because it'll only do exactly what you tell it to do. It's like when somebody's moving from a point and shoot camera to a DSLR camera, they actually initially get worse images because they don't know how to do the controls very well because the camera does exactly what you tell it to. There's no automatic features. So if you know how to use a regular camera, then it's no different. That's the beauty and the challenge of using the Xperia, I think.
Okay, awesome. From smartphone photography to film, Ken and Paula Thompson asking, do you have any black and white film that you recommend? Do you still shoot it? Any favorites?
You know, well, so I shoot with for film, I shoot with a Leica M6.
Oh, nice.
It's a great camera. I as far and it's been sitting on my shelf for a while, but I really like the Ilford 100 for the film. I think because I'm a landscape photographer and I shoot everything on a tripod. The slow speed doesn't bother me. I like the fact that it's grain free. I like how it renders the tone, how it reacts to physical filters I put in front of it, and the dynamic range is amazing. So that's my favorite.
Awesome. David's asking, what are the advantage of color optical filters over digital post processing for black and white photography?
Yeah, so it's one or the other. You can't take your color digital camera, put it on black and white, and put a color filter in front of it, thinking that you're going to get some kind of effect. It doesn't work that way. These color filters only work on a monochrome sensor. And right now, I think there's only two manufacturers I know that do that. I know Leica makes the monochrome, and I think um, Pentax has come out with a monochrome sensor camera. So it'll work. This made exactly for that. Or you use it with black and white film, right? Uh, the I guess the downside of something like this is, let's say you have a film camera and you're putting a filter, you don't get to see the effect real time of what these filters have. Because looking through the viewfinder, you're going to see color, right? Advantage of shooting a monochrome camera or monochrome sensor camera is that as you put these filters in front, you're going to see exactly the effect you're going to get, right? That's the advantage. However, if you shoot with a color sensor, which I think is the way to go, you can decide later on what effect you want. With a physical filter, you have to decide at the point of taking a picture, do I want the effect to be where the sky is dramatically dark with a red filter? Do I want the green foliage to be bright with a green filter? With the color camera, you don't have to worry about that. You worry about all of that in post-processing. Now, there are purists and there are people who love the idea of getting it all right in camera from starting out. If that's what gets your goat, that's fine. But it's different strokes for different folks. So I really wouldn't say there's one advantage of one over the other. It all depends on how your workflow goes.
Polarizing topic. And speaking of polarizing, Gonzalo's asking about polarizer filters. Any
Yes.
polarizer filters that you use? Is there anything for black and white photography specifically that you see an advantage with?
No, no. So how you use the polarizing filter for color is sort of similar. It gives you more contrast, but again, be careful of its effect on the sky. For ultra wide angle lenses, it's going to have that gradient effect where a portion of the sky is much darker than the other portion. In digital photography, how I use polarizing filter, particularly on a wide angle field of view, is like I'll take an image with the polarizer engaged to have an effect on the foliage and the water to get the contrast out, but the sky will be crappy. You'll have that gradient effect.
Mm.
And then I take another image with the polarized disengaged. So the sky is not affected, and I just blend those two images later in post-processing. But to answer your question, yes, use polarizing filters as you normally would, but just be careful.
Awesome. Elizabeth's asking about the filter. Does the use of the filter depend on what you want to emphasize?
Yes, yes, absolutely. So let's take, for example, a black and white film camera. You're taking a picture of a landscape. The sky is beautifully blue with white fluffy clouds, and you want to emphasize the sky. And you go, I want that to be really dark. I want to make it dramatic. Then you put a red filter or an orange filter or a yellow filter, depending on the degree of darkness you want to achieve in the sky, right? So yes, but let's say I want the foliage to be really bright. Then you put it, and it's like a summer scene, spring scene. Then you put a green filter on to have an effect just on the green foliage. But be careful because there is a complementary effect, right? So it doesn't affect. It has the same color filter has a lightening effect or brightening effect on the color that you're looking at. So if the green filter has a brightening effect on the green, but it has other effects on other colors. So again, it comes down to if you don't want that, take a color image, take it into the Lightroom, and then use that slider and choose the specific color you want to have an effect on and go at it that way. If you want to really challenge yourself and have headaches, then do it black and white with filters. I'm kidding, of course, but yeah.
That's the greatest editing thing for anybody who's interested in black and white, manipulating the individual color channels. It's like everyone has gotten so used to like presets. Okay, they have their purpose. I don't particularly use them, but it's good for speed and when you're doing stuff in bulk. But when you realize the power that you have in each of those individual color channels to go in and change and manipulate the black and white level, and you can get exactly the type of contrast and
Yeah.
punch you want from a black and white image. It's
And
really
you can
game
control
changing.
it individually. It's like with a physical filter, you're affecting just the reds or
Yeah,
just the blue. With this, you can go and affect
it's
everything.
that
And
local adjustment.
yeah, and that little thing at the upper left-hand corner that I showed you, that's not just the sliders, but that the color picker or the tone picker, and going exactly on the tone and going up and down. I mean, it's almost makes it a no-brainer. You don't
It's
have to
wild.
worry. You don't have to realize, oh, that's a red. I have to choose a blue. No.
Yeah, that's totally awesome. Jesse, I'm gonna take your question and kind of reframe it here. Jesse was asking, is it possible to take a picture in very good lighting and make it look good in black and white? Definitely is possible. But I want to twist it to make it a little more universal. Some things don't translate well to black and white. Sometimes because you're taking all the color out, you're taking out the ability to differentiate, which sometimes it's distracting, but sometimes color is very helpful because we see recognizable colors and recognizable things.
Right.
What is a good tip for if you are interested in taking you take a really good shot, you want to see if it looks good in black and white? Are there types of images that you think play better in black and white, or what maybe on the converse side, what are some images in color or types of images in color that would be more distracting than black and white?
Yeah. So, that's a sort of great question and sort of a twist on the question. I find like a lot of scenes, with beautiful colors in the sky, where you got purples and pinks and yellows. It doesn't translate very well into black and white photography because they often are close enough in tones that it just becomes a
Mm,
single tone in monochrome.
you
So
lose
you
that
bring some,
range.
yeah, you lose that range and you lose the subtlety of that. So I think like sunsets and sunrises in landscape particularly are not so great for a conversion into black and white. Now conversely, you know, images like I said, harnessing or embracing the harsh light, things in very bright midday sun, mid-afternoon sun that may not look so great because the colors are quote unquote washed out because of the very bright light may look great in monochrome because you're not relying on the colors. And that's why I tell people, just because shooting in midday, don't put your camera away just because it's midday. Concentrate on the other aspects of photography and to hone those skills, your composition, your ability to see framing, textures, flow, use filters, because that's the time when you can in your mind say, okay, I'm gonna try to make this in black and white, and I know that I've got all the other elements here. It's just the light part that I'm missing, and
Mhm.
the light part isn't as crucial sometimes for black and white photography.
Yeah. I have a question here, and this rings true with me because I set my EVF. I love photographing in black and white. I love seeing in black and white. But what about you? Matt's asking, do you recommend setting the viewfinder to black and white? In essence, seeing what you're photographing in real time in black and white.
I think the answer to that question is always yes. I think, like, why not? Like, if you're thinking of shooting in black and white and you want to get an idea what it looks like, set it to black and white, you always put it back to color, right? What you don't get in most cameras now, some cameras are coming up with presets or color profiles where they're actually able to emphasize the reds or the greens. So you can do, like, I think Fuji actually
Mhm.
probably does that better than anybody that I know of. Uh, that you could do that, set it to black and white, see how it looks, and take the image. But you know what? I just shoot everything in RAW, and then I decide later on like how it would look. That way, I don't have to make a decision when I'm taking a picture whether I'm going to make it into a black and white or I'm going to make it into a color.
Yeah. I mean, for me, I think I see, I don't know why I see so much better. I think black and white helps me cut through a lot of the distraction.
Yeah.
It's like when you see a color, when you see a colorful scene, whether it's something that is really cohesively color, like, when you have that really nice color coordination, or if you see something that's like super bright colors that are all kind of playing together, it's like, okay, it's a no-brainer. You see, I already know it's
Yeah.
going to be good in color. Black and white for me, I think, is good in the situations of, do I like this or do I not like it? But it can be misleading because everything on the street looks great in black and white. It just,
Yeah,
I
that's
think
what
you
I
have like
say.
this
The subject matter makes
pre-programmed,
was a big difference. As a
like a
street photographer,
pre-programmed
I think that's
bias.
your money. That's bread and butter for you, right?
Yeah, yeah. But
I
it's
try to
like
put a
it's
landscape
dangerous.
twist to it.
Don't use it as a crutch, people. It should not,
That's
black
right.
and white should not be a crutch. It shouldn't be a
Yeah.
crutch for bad or mediocre images. It kind of takes the same level of discerning as you would on color. Just you got to be, certain things are made for black and white, and certain things aren't. We had a question slip in here from David. By digital conversion of a color to monochrome photo, is adjusting the color saturation tool to zero a good means?
Well, so the beautiful thing is the software knows that it's still in color. Just because you've made it into saturation zero doesn't mean the computer doesn't know that there's color elements there. So set it to saturation zero. That'll give you sort of the dull, unemphasized image in monochrome. And then you can still go and work with the different channels and the different sliders to get it to look the way you want. So yeah, as far as the camera, unless you save the image, right? Let's say you made it into monochrome, you saved it as a separate file. Now that color information is lost, right? You've thrown it away. And if you work on that image now as a pure monochrome, then it doesn't make sense. You can't do any of the saturations and all that stuff. So as long as you leave it in color, you can go back to it and make it as many. I think that's what the question was. Please
Yeah, and I
clarify
think
what
just to kind of piggyback on that there, Mahesh,
yeah,
is it goes back to your point about certain similar colors that are have differentiation in color, what
but not black.
may look the, it all may be the same color plane or the same tone in monochrome. That's where it gets dangerous, just taking a saturation tool and desaturating everything, is you don't know how certain colors are going to translate differently. So going back to what Mahesh was recommending, that's I think the main point for, or maybe against, just desaturating. It can give you, take that slider, boom, if you want to see real quick. Or now I think they have like the black and white button that you could just click
Yeah,
in
right.
most of the things just to get a quick preview. But yeah, I think it really is all about that individual manipulation of the color channels. Well, I think we covered a good bit here. We
We
got some
did.
Q&A in, we got you through the presentation, everything worked out good. So huge thank you to Mahesh
What is
as
that? What
always.
is that?
Don't you? I'll cold stop this right now. I told him if he acts up, I'm driving out to Seattle. So I'm trying. Is B&H covering this or what? Mahesh, always good having you on, man. It always leaves me. I always come out of this in a good mood. So
That's great. That's
thank
all
you
I can
again,
ask.
man. That's it, man. It's this is what it's about. Is we're preaching passion and loving what we do and trying to help a couple people along the way.
Yeah.
There
Thanks,
you
guys.
go.
I appreciate it. Appreciate you. Appreciate everybody in Sony and just I just have a great time, Fred and Derek, everybody in the group. I love you guys.
Likewise, we love you too. Huge thank you to Mahesh, Sony, and of course all of you out there watching, listening, taking notes, doing whatever you do. That is it. That's all we have for you in the books today. Another edition of the B&H Virtual Event Space. Now going offline for the day. Catch y'all next time.